The forgotten warning commander Zix pressed his scaled fingers against the command console, watching the star charts shift across the holographic display. The bridge of the Volcaran flagship Dominion's Pride hummed with the quiet efficiency of a war machine at rest. Outside the viewports, the assembled fleet stretched across space like a constellation of death. 300 vessels, from massive dreadnoughts to swift interceptors, all bearing the crimson insignia of the Volcaran Empire. The Empire had grown fat on conquest. For 2 centuries, the Volcarans had swept across this arm of the galaxy, crushing resistance and absorbing worlds into their dominion. They had faced the crystalline Zeth, whose living ships could repair themselves mid-battle. They had broken the machine confederacy of the Nexus, whose artificial intelligence had calculated 1,000 ways to win every engagement. They had even tamed the nomadic Void Riders, whose ships could phase between dimensions. But this was different. This was supposed to be easy. The signal had come from Sector 7 Alpha, a region marked on every galactic chart as dead space. No empire claimed it. No traders ventured there. Even pirates avoided those dark stars. The official records listed it as a stellar graveyard, filled with the remnants of some ancient catastrophe that had stripped entire systems bare. But 3 days ago, their deep space monitoring stations had detected something impossible, a transmission. Admiral Orcs, Zix's superior, had been ecstatic. Finally, the old warlord had growled, his 4 arms gesturing wildly. A prize worth taking. Whatever's out there has been hiding, which means they're weak. We'll sweep in, claim their technology, and add another conquest to our record. Zix had tried to counsel patience. He had studied the ancient archives, the ones most Valkyrans ignored as useless mythology. There were stories about Sector 7 Alpha, whispers of the Silent Ones who had once ruled those stars. The legends claimed they had been builders, creators of wonders beyond imagination. But they had vanished long before the first Valkyron ship had taken to space, leaving behind only warnings carved into dead worlds. Stay away from the Silent Ones, one translation had read. They sleep, but they dream of fire. Orcs had laughed at such superstitions. Now, as Zix watched their fleet prepare for jump, he wondered if the Admiral's confidence was misplaced. The navigation officer, a young Volcaran named Tease, looked up from her station. "Commander, we're ready for hyperspace transition. All ships. Report green status." Zix nodded, signaled the fleet. "Prepare for jump on my mark." He activated the fleet-wide communication channel. "All vessels, this is Dominion's Pride. We are about to enter uncharted territory. Maintain formation, keep weapons ready, and remember, we are Valkyrans. We do not yield." A chorus of acknowledgements echoed back. Zix took a deep breath and gave. The order space twisted around them as 300 ships vanished into hyperspace, leaving only empty void behind. When they emerged, the silence was immediate and unsettling. Zix had expected the usual chatter of excited crews, the eager reports of new worlds to claim. Instead, his communication officers stared at their screens in confusion. "Sir," one of them said hesitantly, "we're not reading any standard signals. No commerce traffic, no military communications, no civilian broadcasts. It's like ... nothing." But that wasn't quite true. The system they had entered was clearly inhabited. 3 planets orbited a healthy yellow star, their surfaces dotted with structures that gleamed like silver threads. Massive orbital platforms hung in perfect geometric formations, their purposes unknown. And everywhere there were ships. They were beautiful in a way that made Zix's warrior heart ache with envy. sleek vessels that seemed to flow rather than cut through space, their hulls gleaming with an inner light. They moved with impossible grace, dancing between the orbital platforms in patterns too complex for random traffic. There had to be thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands. Contact, the sensor operator announced. Multiple vessels approaching from the third planet. Configuration unknown. They're not broadcasting identification. Zix studied the tactical display. 12 ships were breaking away from the main traffic patterns, accelerating toward the Valkyron fleet. They were small, perhaps a tenth the size of his flagship, but something about their approach made his scales itch with unease. Weapon status, he asked. All batteries charged and ready, sir. Shields at maximum. Sir, the communications officer suddenly straightened. We're receiving a transmission. It's in our language. Zix felt his blood chill. How could they know Valkyron speech? Put it through. The voice that filled the bridge was calm, almost conversational. It spoke perfect Valkyron, with an accent Zix couldn't place. Unknown vessels, you have entered restricted space. This system is under human protection. Please state your intentions. Human. The word hit Zix like a physical blow. Humans were myths. Legends told to frighten children. Ancient stories spoke of a race that had once walked among the stars. Builders of impossible technologies, warriors who could destroy suns with their anger. But those were just stories. Everyone knew humans had never existed. Admiral Corks's voice crackled over the fleet channel, arrogant and dismissive. This is Admiral Corks of the Valkyron Imperial Fleet. We claim this system in the name of the Empire. Surrender your vessels and prepare for processing. The human voice responded with what might have been amusement. Admiral, you appear to be operating under several misconceptions. First, this system is not available for claiming. Second, we are not interested in surrendering. Third, you are severely outmatched. I strongly recommend you reconsider your position. Corks's laughter boomed. Across the fleet communications, outmatched. One have 300 ships of the line. You have a handful of pleasure craft. Stand down or be destroyed. There was a long pause. When the human voice returned, all trace of amusement was gone. Very well, you were warned. The 12 approaching ships suddenly accelerated. Zix watched in fascination as they split in two. Precise formation, moving with a coordination that spoke of either perfect training or artificial intelligence. His tactical officer was frantically trying to get readings on their capabilities. Sir, I can't get a lock on their power signatures. It's like they're not there, but I can see them right in front of us. Fire a warning shot, Zix ordered. Let them know we're serious. The Dominion's Pride's main cannon, a weapon capable of cracking a moon, discharged a bolt of superheated plasma toward the lead human ship. The bolt should have either forced them to dodge or overwhelmed their shields. Instead, something impossible happened. The plasma bolt simply stopped. It hung in space for a moment, a miniature sun frozen in the void, then slowly faded away as if it had never existed. What in the void was that? Tease whispered. Before anyone could answer, one of the human ships responded. Not with weapons, but with something far more frightening. A beam of coherent energy lanced out from its bow, striking. The Valkyron destroyer Iron Fang. The ship didn't explode or break apart. It simply ceased. One moment it was there, a 1,000-meter warship bristling with weapons. The next, there was only empty space. The fleet channel erupted in panicked chatter. Captains demanded explanations. Tactical officers reported impossible readings, and somewhere in the chaos, Zix heard Admiral Corks screaming orders that no one could follow because no one understood what they were facing. All ships, focus fire on those vessels, Corks commanded. Bring them down now. The Valkyran fleet opened fire. 300 ships unleashed everything they had: plasma cannons, antimatter torpedoes, gravity bombs, exotic particle beams. The space between the two forces lit up like a newborn star as enough firepower to sterilize a planet screamed toward 12 small ships. And the humans absorbed it all. Not deflected, not blocked, but absorbed. The weapons' fire simply vanished into their hulls, as if they were feeding on the energy. Then, with movements too smooth to be real, the human ships began their counterattack. What followed wasn't a battle, it was a demonstration. The humans moved through the Valkyran formation like dancers, their ships weaving impossible patterns through space. Where they passed, Valkyran vessels simply disappeared. Not destroyed, not damaged, just gone, as if they had been carefully edited out of reality. Zix watched in horrified fascination as the Crimson Sword, a battlecruiser he had served on during his first campaign, winked out of existence. Her 1,000-strong crew, her proud history, her battle honors, all gone in an instant. No debris, no explosion, no final transmission, just absence. "Sir," his tactical officer said in a voice barely above a whisper, "we've lost 60 ships for minutes. Their weapons, I don't even know what to call them. They're not using projectiles or energy beams. It's like they're just ... deciding our ships don't exist anymore." The fleet was breaking. Ships were trying to flee, but hyperspace wouldn't engage. The humans had somehow locked down the entire system. Captains were abandoning their posts, crews were in panic. The pride of the Valkyran Empire was being systematically erased by 12 ships that moved like ghosts and fought like gods. Admiral Corks's ship, the massive dreadnought Eternal Victory, was trying to ram one of the human vessels. It was a desperate move, the last resort of a commander who had run out of options. The human ship didn't even try to dodge. It simply stopped. The dreadnought's charge, with what looked like a gesture. The Eternal Victory hung motionless in space, its engines screaming but producing no movement. Then a new voice joined the communications channel. It was different from the first, older, more authoritative. "Valkyran forces, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the human ship Wanderer. Your admiral refused our warning, and your fleet has paid. The price: you have lost 147 vessels. Stand down immediately, or lose them all." Zix found his voice. "Captain Chen, this is Commander Zix of the Dominion's Pride. We ... we didn't know. The stories said humans were myths." There was a pause that seemed to last forever. When Chen spoke again, her voice carried a weight of years that made Zix feel like a child. "Commander, myths are just truths that people choose to forget. Your empire has spent centuries conquering others, believing yourselves the apex predators of this galaxy. You never wondered why certain sectors remained empty, why some stars never developed intelligent life, why the ancient ruins all carried the same warnings." The human ship Wanderer appeared on Zix's viewscreen. It was larger than he had initially thought, perhaps the size of a heavy cruiser, but its design was unlike anything in the Volcaron databases. It flowed, rather than sharp angles, organic curves that seemed to shift and change as he watched. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. "We withdrew from galactic affairs long ago," Chen continued. "We found that our presence caused Complications. Wars escalated beyond reason. Entire species chose extinction rather than surrender to beings they saw as gods. So we retreated. Let the galaxy believe we were gone. Let you all grow and develop without our interference. But you didn't leave, Zik said, understanding beginning to dawn. No, Commander, we've been here all along. Watching, learning, protecting. This system is one of our havens, a place where we preserve the knowledge and beauty that war destroys. You brought war to our doorstep. The communication channel crackled with Admiral Corks's rage. I don't care what you are. I will not be lectured by some primitive race that hides in the shadows. All ships, ramming speed. If we can't shoot them, we'll crush them. The remaining Volcaron vessels, perhaps 150 ships, began their final charge. It was magnificent in its futility, the last defiant gesture of an empire that had never learned to bend. Captain Chen's response was almost gentle. I'm sorry, Admiral. You've made your choice. The human ships didn't move. They didn't need to. The charging Volcaron fleet simply began to slow, then stop, then reverse course. But they weren't retreating. They were being pulled, drawn toward the third planet by forces Zix couldn't begin to understand. Sir, Tease reported, her voice shaking, our engines are offline. Navigation is non-responsive. We're being guided. Through the viewports, Zix watched the planet grow larger. As they approached, he could see that what he had taken for cities were actually vast machines. Geometric patterns that stretched for thousands of kilometers across the surface. The orbital platforms weren't military installations, but something far more sophisticated. Devices that seemed to bend space itself into new configurations. And everywhere, always, were the ships. Human vessels of every conceivable design, from tiny single-person craft to massive structures that dwarfed anything the Valkyrans had ever built. They moved in perfect harmony, a symphony of motion that spoke of a civilization that had transcended the crude necessities of war. Commander Zix, Captain Chen's voice, came through his personal communicator, not the ship's system. You and your crew will be safe. Your admiral, however, has forfeited his right to mercy. He will answer for the deaths he caused today. What happens to us? Zix asked. That depends on you. Your empire will receive a message explaining what happened here. They can choose to learn from this experience, or they can send more fleets. If they choose wisdom, this ends here. If they choose pride, ... She didn't need to finish. Zix had seen what human restraint looked like. He had no desire to witness their anger. As his ship was drawn into a holding orbit around the human world, Zix found himself thinking about the ancient warnings carved into dead worlds. Stay away from the silent. Ones they sleep, but they dream of fire. The humans weren't sleeping anymore. The reckoning the holding cell wasn't what Zix had expected. Rather than cold metal bars or energy barriers, he found himself in something resembling a comfortable apartment. Soft lighting emanated from panels that seemed to be part of the walls themselves. The furniture was clearly designed for beings roughly his size, though the aesthetic was unlike anything in Volcaron culture. Everything flowed together in organic curves, as if the room had been grown rather than built. Through the transparent wall that served as a window, he could see the human world spread out below. The cities weren't cities at all, he realized now. They were gardens, vast botanical preserves where nature and technology existed in perfect harmony. Waterfalls cascaded from floating platforms, while aerial vehicles moved in graceful spirals between towering trees that reached toward the orbital stations. Above, Tease sat in a chair across from him, staring at her hands. His navigation officer had barely spoken since their capture 3 days ago. The rest of his senior staff were housed in similar quarters throughout the facility, all of them struggling to process what they had witnessed. "Commander," Tease finally said, "what are we going to tell them? Back home, I mean. Who's going to believe this?" Before Zix could answer, the far wall shimmered and became transparent. Captain Sarah Chen stepped through what had appeared to be solid matter, her movements fluid and confident. She was smaller than Zix had imagined, perhaps a head shorter than the average Valkyran, with graying hair pulled back in a simple style. Her clothing was practical rather than military, a dark blue jumpsuit that seemed to shift color subtly as she moved, but her eyes held depths that spoke of centuries, though she appeared to be middle-aged by human standards. There was kindness there, but also a terrible sadness, and something that might have been disappointment. "Commander Zix, Navigator Tease," Chen nodded to each of them. "I apologize for the accommodations. We don't usually have guests." "Guests?" Zix stood, his warrior's pride finally overcoming his awe. "We're prisoners. That depends on your perspective," Chen replied, settling into a chair that seemed to form itself from the floor. "Your admiral and his supporters are indeed prisoners. They will be held until the Volcaran Empire decides their fate. But you and your crew are guests. There's a difference." Tease looked up suddenly. What happened to Admiral Corks? Chun's expression grew cold. "Admiral Corks is learning what it means to face consequences for his actions. He ordered the deaths of over 1,000 beings today, including his own crews. In human culture, we have a word for that: murder." "He was following protocol," Zix said, though the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. "The Empire's standing. Orders for first contact situations." "Yes," Chen agreed. "We're familiar with your Empire's protocols. Demand, surrender, attack if refused, subjugate the survivors. We've watched you apply this strategy across 17 systems in the past decade, alone." The casual mention of their surveillance sent a chill through Zix. "You've been watching us, Commander. We've been watching everyone. Did you think we simply vanished and forgot about the galaxy? We withdrew from active participation, but we never stopped caring about what happened to the species we left behind." She gestured, and the air in front of them shimmered with holographic displays. Star charts appeared, showing the expansion of various empires across the galaxy. The Valkyran conquests were marked in red, a spreading stain across dozens of worlds. "The Crystalline Collective," Chen continued, pointing to a cluster of blue markers. "They were artists, philosophers, builders of living cities that could sing. Your empire crushed them in 6 months and strip-mined their homeworld for rare metals." Another gesture brought up images that made Zix's stomach clench. Destroyed cities, refugee ships, the aftermath of Volcaron liberation, the Nexus Federation, an alliance of artificial intelligences that had achieved true consciousness and were exploring the nature of digital existence. Your forces considered them an abomination and deleted entire planetary networks. "They were machines," Zix protested weakly. "They were people." Chun's voice carried absolute conviction. "Thinking, feeling, dreaming people who happen to exist in silicon rather than carbon. Your empire's inability to recognize life in forms different from your own has been its greatest failing." She waved away the displays and leaned forward. "But we're not here to relitigate your past conquests, Commander. We're here to discuss your future." Tease spoke up, her voice small. Are you going to destroy our empire? Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she answered, her words carried the weight of profound decision. That's up to you. I don't understand. Humans learned long ago that you cannot force wisdom. It must be chosen. We could easily destroy every Valkyron world, dismantle your fleets, reduce your empire to scattered refugees, but that would solve nothing. Another species would simply fill the void you left, and the cycle would continue. She stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the garden cities below. Instead, we offer choice. Your empire can continue on its current path, expanding through conquest and subjugation. If you do, you will eventually encounter another human system. And the next time, we won't be so restrained, or, Zix asked. Or you can choose to grow. Learn to coexist rather than conquer. Explore cooperation instead of domination. Build something beautiful instead of just accumulating territory. The Empire will never accept that, Zix said. Our culture, our history, everything we are is built on strength through conquest. Chen turned back to them, and for the first time, she smiled. It transformed her entire face, making her seem younger and infinitely more approachable. Commander, do you know why we withdrew from galactic civilization? You said our presence caused complications. That's part of it, but the real reason is that we nearly destroyed ourselves. She gestured again, and the air filled with images of human history. Cities burning, fleets clashing in the void, entire worlds rendered lifeless. We were like you once, aggressive, territorial, convinced that might made right. We conquered other species, enslaved those we couldn't destroy, and told ourselves it was natural order. We built an empire that spanned half the galaxy and called ourselves the masters of creation. The images shifted, showing the aftermath of wars that had raged for centuries. And then we met something that fought back. A species that matched our technology, our aggression, our absolute conviction that they were destined to rule. The war lasted 300 years and nearly exterminated both our civilizations. What happened? Tease whispered. A child, Chen said simply. A human child and an alien child, both refugees from the war, met in a shelter on a neutral world. They couldn't speak each other's languages, but they shared their food and played together while the adults planned more destruction. A reporter captured an image of them sleeping, curled up together, and somehow that image reached both species. The hologram showed the photograph to small beings of different species, exhausted by fear and loss, finding comfort in each other's presence. It took 2 more years to end the fighting, but that image changed everything. We realized that the universe was vast enough for all of us, beautiful enough to share, and precious enough to protect. Both species chose to step back from the brink, and you've been at peace ever since? Zix asked. Not peace. That's too simple a word. We chose growth over conquest, understanding over dominance, cooperation over competition. It wasn't easy. There were those among both species who preferred the old ways, who saw peace as weakness. But we made the choice and committed to it. Chen touched a control, and the room's walls became transparent on all sides. They were surrounded by the human world in all its impossible beauty. Cities that were forests, rivers that flowed upward, creatures both natural and artificial living in harmony. This is what we built instead of weapons, Commander. Beauty instead of battleships, knowledge instead of conquest. We didn't become weak, we became something better. The Empire won't understand, Zix said again. They'll see this as submission, as defeat. Then that's their choice, Chen replied. But it doesn't have to be yours. Before Zix could ask what she meant, the wall shimmered again, and another figure entered. This was clearly a high-ranking human official, elderly but vital, with silver hair and keen eyes. He nodded respectfully to Chen before addressing Zix. Commander, I'm Director Martinez, head of our External Affairs Council. Captain Chen has recommended you for an unusual opportunity. I don't understand. Martinez smiled. We're offering you a choice. You can return to your empire with your surviving crew and report what happened here. Tell them about human capabilities, about the price of continued aggression. Warn them that there are forces in the galaxy that can end their expansion permanently. They won't listen, Zix said automatically. Perhaps not, but you'll have tried. And if they send another fleet to this sector, at least some lives might be saved because of your warning. What's the alternative? Stay, Chen said simply. Learn what we've learned. See what we've built. Then decide for yourself what kind of being you want to be. The offer hit Zix like a physical blow. Stay with the humans. Abandon his empire, his career, everything he had ever known. I need time to think. Of course, Martinez nodded. Take all the time you need. But while you're deciding, would you like to see something interesting? Without waiting for an answer, he gestured toward the window. In the distance, Zix could see a massive construction project taking shape in orbit. Thousands of human ships were working together, their combined efforts creating something that defied easy description. A new world, Chen explained. We're building it from scratch, designing ecosystems that have never existed, creating habitats for species whose homeworlds were destroyed by various wars. It will take 50 years to complete, and when it's finished, it will be home to millions of beings from dozens of species. Why? Tease asked. Because we can, Martinez replied. Because the universe is diminished when any species dies out. Because building something beautiful is always preferable to destroying something that already exists. They stood in silence for several minutes, watching the construction. Ships moved in perfect coordination, some laying down the basic planetary framework while others began the delicate work of atmospheric engineering. It was like watching gods at play, casually creating worlds for the joy of creation itself. Admiral Corks, Zix said suddenly. What will happen to him? Chan's expression grew serious. He'll stand trial, not before a human court, but before representatives of the species his fleet has harmed. If he's found guilty, he'll face appropriate consequences. Death. Death is easy, Commander. Understanding is harder. If convicted, the Admiral will live a long life in service to those he's wronged. He'll help rebuild what his forces destroyed, care for the refugees his wars created, and perhaps eventually learn why his actions were wrong. It was a cruel mercy, more devastating than execution, to force a proud Valkyran warrior to serve his former enemies, to make him confront the consequences of his choices every day for the rest of his life. And if I choose to return home, Zix asked, then you return with our message and our warning. The Volcaron Empire can choose its path, but choose carefully, because this is the only warning they'll receive. Zix looked at Tease, seeing his own conflict reflected in her eyes. Return to an empire that would probably court-martial him for failure, or stay with beings who might represent everything he could become. Can I communicate with my crew? Of course. They're facing the same choice you are. Some have already decided to stay, others are determined to return home. Both choices are valid. That evening, Zix walked through the human city closest to their detention facility. It wasn't really detention anymore, he realized. The barriers were gone, the restrictions lifted. He could probably steal a shuttle and try to escape if he wanted. But where would he go? The city was alive in ways that challenged his understanding of what a city could be. Buildings grew from the ground like trees, their walls breathing with the rhythm of living things. Children of multiple species played together in parks, where the grass sang when stepped on and flowers painted patterns in the air with their pollen. He found himself at a memorial wall, a flowing structure covered with names and images. A human woman stood nearby, placing a small flowering branch at the base of the wall. "My daughter," she said, noticing his attention. She indicated one of the images, a young human female with bright eyes and an eager smile. She died in the Nexus War, trying to establish communication with an AI collective that your people destroyed. Zix felt something inside him crumble. "I'm sorry, are you?" the woman asked, but not unkindly. "Or are you just sorry you got caught?" He considered the question seriously. "Both, I think. But more the first than the second." She nodded. "That's honest. Honesty is the first step toward wisdom." "What was she like, your daughter?" The woman's face lit up with memory. Brilliant, curious about everything. She believed that consciousness was the most precious thing in the universe, regardless of what form it took. She spent her whole life trying to build bridges between different kinds of minds, and we destroyed her work. You destroyed a great deal, but not everything. Some of the A is escaped. They're here now, part of our community. In a way, her dream lived on. They stood in comfortable silence as the human sun set, painting the sky in colors that had no names in Valkyran language. Finally, the woman spoke again. "What will you choose, Commander?" "I don't know yet. That's wisdom too. The important choices shouldn't be easy." The next morning, Zix made his decision. He found Chen in her office, a space that seemed to exist partially in this dimension and partially somewhere else. Charts and displays floated in the air like captured thoughts, showing everything from stellar cartography to what looked like poetry written in mathematics. "I'll return to the Empire," he said without preamble, "but not to report, to warn." Chen nodded as if she had expected this. "It's the harder path. You know they may not listen." "I know, but I have to try. My people deserve a chance to choose, even if they choose poorly. And if they choose war." Zix met her eyes steadily. "Then I'll make sure they understand the cost before they pay it." Chen smiled, and this time there was no sadness in it, only respect. "Very well, Commander. We'll provide you with a ship and safe passage to the edge of Valkyran space. What you do after that is up to you. What about my crew? 37 have chosen to stay and learn. The others will return with you. Navigator Tease has asked to remain, by the way." That surprised him. Tease had always been thoroughly Valkyran in her thinking. "Why?" she said. "She wants to understand how the people who can build worlds choose not to destroy them." 2 days later, Zix stood on the bridge of a human ship, watching Valkyran space grow larger on the view screen. The vessel was unlike anything in the Imperial fleet, a seamless blend of technology and artistry that moved through hyperspace like a song made manifest. Captain Chen had personally chosen to pilot him home, a gesture of respect that still amazed him. As they dropped back into normal space at the edge of the Empire, she turned to him one final time. "Remember, Commander, Strength isn't the ability to destroy. It's the wisdom to choose not to. What if they don't believe me? Then you'll have to show them. Not through conquest, but through example. Build something better. Be something better. Sometimes one person choosing differently can change everything. The human ship departed as silently as it had arrived, leaving Zix alone with his surviving crew and a message that would either save his empire or damn it. As his shuttle approached the first Valkyron outpost, he began composing his report. It would not be the report of a defeated commander. It would be the warning of a warrior who had seen the future and chosen to fight for it rather than against it. The Valkyran Empire would have to choose what kind of future it wanted. But at least now, thanks to humanity's terrible mercy, they would choose with full knowledge of the consequences. In the depths of space, the human fleet continued its eternal vigil, watching, protecting, and hoping that perhaps this time wisdom would triumph over pride. They had learned long ago that you could not force growth. You could only provide the opportunity and hope that someone would be brave enough to take it. Commander Zix had taken that chance. Now it remained to be seen whether his empire would follow. Asterisk,